Okay, so objective number 5 by far is the hardest, or at least the most involved. It's really you do number 4 twice and make a comparison. So it says use the reaction from number 4 to determine the limiting reactant if you have 210.5 grams of chromium and 98.4 grams of oxygen. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll this down, try and make some room to cram this all in. So the equation we had was 2 chromium plus oxygen gas gives you 2 chromium oxide. And this time you're being told you have 210.5 grams of chromium and 98.4 grams of oxygen. And neither one is being called the excess or the limiting reactant. So when they give you a mass of both reactants, you have to figure out the limiting reactant. Okay, so how do you figure out the limiting reactant? I need to know how many moles each of these makes, and then I need to predict how much product each one can make. And there's a couple different ways to do this. The book does it a little bit different than I do. But what I like to do is start with my first reactant, chromium, take the 210.5 grams, and find out how many moles of chromium that would be. So pure chromium still weighs 52 grams. So I've got around 4 moles here, 210.5 divided by the 52, so 4.05 moles. This is moles of chromium. And then the oxygen, the O2, I've got 98.4 grams. It's O2, so I divide by 32, not just 16. And this is 3.075 moles. Now, even though I've got fewer moles of oxygen, I can't make a decision yet because I don't use 1 mole of each. I use 2 moles of chromium and 1 mole of oxygen. So here's where there's really 2 different ways you could do this. The way I did it in my videos and generally encourage people to do it is to go ahead and set up your molar ratio 2Cr from 2CRO, 2 chromium oxide from 2 chromium, means this would really be 4.05 moles of chromium oxide. But the oxygen, I get 2 moles of CRO from just 1 mole of O2. So this would double to 6.15, I think that is. Moles of CRO. So now when I compare it, the chromium's going to make less product, so that's my limiting reactant. The other way that people commonly do it is at this point when you have these, if you want to divide each by its coefficient, if divided 4 by 2 and 3 by 1, you could compare your amounts that way. You could do different ratios. It's up to you. You just have to be able to show work and justify how you decide your limiting reactant. You have a 50-50 shot at guessing it, so guessing it's not going to get you any marks unless you've got work to show. Okay. Most people don't like their surgeon or their pharmacist or the engineer building the new bridge to, just guess and have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. Like a little more certainty than that. So now that I know my limiting reactant is the chromium, well, I guess that's all we had to do on this one. I think the next one then, do we actually calculate it? Let me just pause this and read what it asked for. So for this objective, that's all I wanted you to do is be able to decide that chromium is the limiting reactant. And then by default, this one's your excess. So know what the terms mean and then be able to do the math to identify each reactant.